Welcome to Rick Rack Ruby. I'm Laura Cluvo. Today we will be making this clothespin mushroom Christmas ornament. It's fun and easy, so let's get started. To make our clothespin mushroom, we'll start with the face. The face is going to go in this part right here, in between the split. The face is going to go in this part right here, in between the split and the top round head, but it's going to go on this part. I'll start by wood burning the eyes. Every once in a while you have a clothespin that's kind of a dud, and I try to avoid those. None of them is perfect. So I'll start with the eyes, kind of halfway between here and here. Check both sides. This one's a little bit cleaner, even though this little bit is a little bit wonky. I think it's more important to have a clean surface for the face. All right, I have the eyes ready to go, and now I'm just going to use my red marker. I'm going to do a little dot for the nose and then a smile like this. Dot for the nose and a smile. These are Pigma Micron 01, archival ink, and permanent. This is brown. I'm just going to add little eyebrows. Boop, boop, boop. Cute. And then some cheeks. This is a Q-tip with a little bit of blush. I'm just going to rub on the sides for cheeks. There we go. The next thing I'm going to need is a jelly roll strip. I've cut the jelly roll strip in half, and you really only need a quarter of a jelly roll strip for each mushroom. So this will make 2. But first I want to run it through my gathering attachment, my ruffler. So I'm going to set it on the tightest setting. I'm going to run it through my machine like this on the tightest setting to gather that up, and I will be right back. Now I will gather up the second edge, and I'm going to set my ruffler on the 6th, which means that it's going to pleat every 6th stitch. And this is completely optional. It just makes the next step a little bit easier. It looks like this, but we only need half. So I'm going to cut this here, and then I'll fold it right sides together and stitch up this little seam. I'll do both of these. They look like little skirts. I'm leaving this right sides together or inside out, and I'm going to insert this. Try to put there's a seam here. I'm going to leave the seam in the back and insert this here above the face like this, so that when I fold it back, this is going to become the underside of the mushroom like this. But for now, I'm going to squeeze out some hot glue around here and then lift this up and press it into the pleats to hold the pleats. And ideally, when I fold this up, I will still be able to see the face. So let's give it a try. That looks good. Here's how it's going to look. Now I'm going to add some stuffing here, and I am going to hand gather this. I only did the second row of pleating because it makes it a little bit easier to manage stuffing. Okay, so a little bit of stuffing, not too much. That might be enough. I'm going to get a needle and a double strand of quilting thread and gather up this top edge. I will secure my knot on the inside. It doesn't really matter, this won't show, but in the seam allowance in the back, and then go all the way around with a running stitch about 1/4 of an inch down from the edge. So I'm actually sewing about halfway between the edge of the fabric and the stitch lines from my pleating. I do have a video called something like how to use the Bernina pleater. I have a Bernina, that's the one I use, but I know that there are similar gadgets for probably every brand of machine. Now I'll gather this tightly. And let's see, I want to make sure I can see the face. Kind of looks like a chef. And then I'm going to secure the thread. I don't really have to tuck all these ends in, they will be covered. So I'm not going to be too worried about neatness. Here's how it looks. It doesn't have to be perfect. Okay, now for the top, the cap of the mushroom, I have 2 circles that I have cut from our Gnome Noel fabric. I have one from the snowflake print and one from the mushroom print. I will stitch all the way around with about maybe a 3/8 of an inch seam allowance. I'm not going to leave any opening. We'll cut an opening in here when we're done. My circles are sewn together, and I'm going to use my new Kai pinking shears to trim around the edge. I've always had trouble with, my pinking shears, they've always been good at first, but then they get dull and you have to get them sharpened, and it's kind of a headache. So it's nice to have a brand new pair. I don't know how long the Kai will last, but I like the scissors. Now this is going to be inside, this won't show. So I'm going to make a little clip here, kind of an X or a cross, boom. It doesn't have to be smack dab in the center, it doesn't have to be perfect. It just needs to be big enough to reach in and turn. Be sure you don't cut through the red, only through the inside. I'm going to use a chopstick to push that out all the way to the edge of the seam. That looks good. I'm going to go over to my iron and press this flat. I used a CD as a pattern to cut this. I like the CD because it's a little bit less than 5 inches, so you can use a charm square if you like to make this project. Now I'm going to top stitch 3/8 of an inch from the edge all the way around. Here's my top stitched circle. You can imagine this is going to go on top here. We'll gather this up to fit around the mushroom base, the bottom. I'm using a doubled strand of red quilting thread, and I'm going to gather up around the edge of the circle, just above, below, or right on top of that stitched line. The top stitching just holds the layers together so that they don't shift while I'm gathering. And also, I've left this little X here on the underside, that won't show. So I will secure my thread and just do a running stitch to gather up the edge of the circle. I'm doing big stitches. It doesn't have to be all small and precise like a quilter. just big stitches. And the big stitches also create a little bit more of a wavy edge. And I like that wavy edge. See? I like that. So I'll stitch all the way around, and I like to use a thimble. Let's try it on. Now I can add a little bit more stuffing at this point if I like. And when I put the mushroom top over the base, I want to tip it a little bit to make sure that I can see the face. Let's see. Yeah, I think I could use a little bit more stuffing. So I'll place some stuffing in between the base and the cap. That looks good. I still have this thread. I'm going to use this to secure the top, the cap to the base. And I'm going to try to distribute the little gathers around evenly and then pin it. Here we go. It's pinned, stitched, gathered. The pleats are distributed fairly evenly, and I'm just going to secure this to the base. I like to do a little bit of back stitching to secure this. I'm stitching very close to the original line, and I'll just go all the way around. I've tipped the cap a little bit so that it's lower in the back and higher in the front so that I can see the face. I'm back around to where I started, so I'm just going to secure my thread. Now I'm going to cover up the stitches with a little row of baker's twine. I thought about introducing something different, but I just want this to look like a collection. So I'm going to use, you know, some of the same elements. And of course, baker's twine is easy to find, inexpensive, and just gives a little bit of whimsy because of the stripes, right? So I'll just stick with my baker's twine. I stitched it in the back to make sure that it kind of stays right on the line there. And then I'm gonna tie a bow here a little bit off center. I'll start with a knot. I don't want the knot to really, I don't want this to pinch it in any further. I just want it to rest along the stitches. I tied a square knot and now I'm tying a bow. I don't want it to be too big. And then I'll tie the streamers in with overhand knots. And I'm going to lift this up a little bit, add a smudge of glue right here, and press that back down into the glue, kind of sending them back to the right. Great. I'm also going to add a hanging loop. Honestly, on my tree, when I have anything made with a clothespin, I just like to hook it right over the branch. I have an artificial tree and it'll just sit right on the branch. But I know not everybody has that, or if you have a live tree, sometimes the branches aren't really strong enough to support something like this. So I'm going to add a hanging loop with the same baker's twine. I try to get it right in the center. That looks good. And then, you know, sometimes I'm looking and I think, does this even look like a mushroom, or does it look like a character with a cap on? Like a Little House on the Prairie cap or something. And so I wanted to add some spots. I cut these little felt circles with my die cutter. Whenever I'm making anything from felt, if I have a scrap left over, I'll use my little tiny dies to cut out little hearts and snowflakes and shapes. And so I always have, in fact, I have a bag of them. Oh, I put it away. Anyway, so I'm thinking about adding these little dots so that it looks a little bit more like a mushroom. And of course, You could also use buttons. You could embroider these on with like little cross stitches or French knots. You could use buttons, sequins, anything you like. But because I want this to be a fast and easy project, I'm just going to glue them. And that's another reason why I put the hanging loop first, because I don't want to accidentally have something glued right here and then decide that's exactly where I want the hanging loop. So I'm just going to kind of randomly, I have 6 of these, and I'm going to place them, and then each one I'll lift up and glue. And the reason that I decided to do it like this is because in the original fabric collection, the Gnome Noel collection, there are red mushrooms with this little white underneath, and they have the white dots on the top. So I'm just trying to mimic this idea by adding the white dots at the top. Let's have a look. Okay, there's the little face. I want to bring this one down a little. Move this one over. Sometimes the hardest thing is to get something to look random. That looks good. Now I'll just lift up each one, add a little smear of glue, and press it back down into the glue. And we are done. This was so quick and fun and easy. I'm going to just continue and make the rest of these that I started. Thank you for watching my tutorial. If you're enjoying my videos, please like, share, and subscribe.